Jamie is Communications and Outreach Coordinator for Mining Watch Canada, where he provides strategic support for campaign, consultation, and negotiation efforts. His focus areas are environmental assessment and land use planning, uranium, and the African and Latin American regional programs. Jamie will present a workshop on uranium mining in Canada, past and present. We also have, we'll have more copies of the new agenda for today. I passed them out and we ran out, so we'll get some printed. And also there are headsets available. We have our translator sitting at the back. So, Jamie?
Merci, Joe. And I would like to thank the community and the organizers of this conference for inviting me, allowing me to be here today. I have a more detailed background note, which is it's on the table. I didn't bring them in here and distribute them, but I have copies on the table outside in the hallway by the food area there, where the handcrafts are. And I'm not going to go through this lengthy, detailed history and context of how Saskatchewan is situated as now the second largest mining source of uranium in the world, and relative to the rest of the world, Kazakhstan, Australia, Southern Africa, and so on. I was advised last night by an elder that I should just speak from my heart. I said, well, if I start telling stories, I don't know where I'll stop. So I'm going to have to be careful to try and stay within the short time that we have here to get going, and hopefully leave some time for discussion after the presentations are finished. I work for a small nonprofit organization based in Ottawa called Mining Watch Canada, and we basically look at the mining industry in Canada and globally, because the Canadian mining industry is dominant around the world. Something like 70 or 80% of the mining companies in the world are actually Canadian. It varies day by day because they get bought out and new ones are created and so on, but that's roughly where we stand. And so we have people coming to us from across the country, but also from around the world, to ask about technical information, to ask about organizing, how do they respond to these situations, and sometimes it's at the exploration phase, and sometimes it's during the life of a mine where there's conflicts and environmental problems, and sometimes it's dealing with abandoned mines. And we have a unique setup because we're set up as a coalition, and the members of Mining Watch include First Nations, trade unions, international organizations, environmental groups, local groups from across Canada, and so we're not able to take an isolated perspective. We have to take a holistic perspective and include the impacts on communities, the impacts on the economy, and as well as the environment of various mining operations that we look at. And that includes uranium mining. And I don't know if everyone is aware, for instance, that the Kikivik uranium mining proposal in Baker Lake has been revived. It was suspended in 1989, and there was opposition from the Haudenosaunee, there was opposition from the Inuit people, from the community of Baker Lake, and the company had presented its environmental impact statement, and there was a federal environmental assessment process going on, and they were told by the panel and by the communities that the information they presented was simply inadequate, and rather than try and respond, they withdrew the proposal and went back to Germany. And then they sold the operation to the French, and now Areva is the one that's bringing it forward. And And so there's another environmental assessment process going on, and I know Beverly Kamenirak Caribou Management Board is going to be intervening on that because it is situated in the middle of the caribou calving grounds. And it is, you know, inevitably the mine itself, the transportation, the activity that's already happened, the exploration activity has already disrupted the caribou herds. And so this is, you know, this is the kind of thing that Mining Watch is not directly involved. We're based in Ottawa. We're not, you know, we're not in Baker Lake. We're not in Lac Brochet. We're not, you know, we don't speak for other people. What we can do is advise and support and provide the information and the linkages so that people have access to the kind of information that the government agencies, the politicians, and the mining companies will not provide. Even if they have access to it, they won't tell you what that information is. So that's our role, and I think how I came into this, that's my story, because in 1989, I read some news items and so on, and I was aware that, you know, northern Saskatchewan was the center of the uranium mining industry and so on. And I heard about, you know, some of the issues, and one of the complaints that the community of Wollaston Lake had was that they were not being informed about what was happening. And I thought, you know, looking at this, I thought that's not fair. You know, people should have access to that information. That's what I think. And so. And people were saying, look, you know, we know that there's changes happening in the environment. We know that you know, the area around Rabbit Lake at that time and over towards Cigar Lake, that was all being disturbed and explored and developed, and you know, the Rabbit Lake mine had already been operating at that time for a number of years, and so people were saying, look, we know that there's environmental effects, and every time we ask what's going on, is the water safe, how's the fish, we're told everything's under control, everything's fine. And then they give us a technical study or an environmental impact statement for the next project that's coming along, and say, look, it's all in here. We don't know what that says. And we don't, and we're not inclined to believe it because our own experience is different. And so I had just come out of university, and I thought, okay, I know how to interpret that information, you know, those studies, and I cannot speak Dene, and I'm not going to learn Dene in a hurry because it's very difficult. But if I can explain things in plain language, and we can discuss them and have it translated, and people can work on it, then we can start figuring out, you know, how much of those concerns are real, to what extent have they actually been addressed, and what are the long-term issues that actually need to be worked on, and start working on those. And so that's what we did, and I was, you know, working with a group of elders here in the community, specifically to look at the traditional knowledge that they had, and the concerns that they had as spokespeople for the community as well. And you know, most of those people are not with us anymore, and I feel that's sort of a burden as well, because, you know, we did a lot of work together, and I learned a lot, and we tried to share that as much as we could with younger people in the community, and work with young people here as well. But it's hard to sustain, and it's hard to maintain that, and you know, so we have this information and this work that was done 20 years ago, and we have to carry that on. So I'll give you one example, because it's very interesting to me. You know, some of the concerns people were saying, look, is the water safe to drink? And we looked at the information and said, yeah, this is a beautiful lake, and it's still much cleaner than the lakes where I come from in southern Ontario that they've got industrial pollution, and they're still drinkable, but, you know, they have traces of all these metals and elements in them. There is some localized pollution around Collins Bay and Hidden Bay where the mines actually are, where the uranium has gone into the sediments. We don't know how much because they never actually did the baseline studies to find out. Before they started mining, they didn't bother finding out what was there to say, so they could then say how much contamination was being contributed by the mining activities. And it was actually thanks to that 1989 spill, the 2 million liters of mine water that went into Collins Bay, that we got the Saskatchewan Research Council to study it. And they came back and said, yes, there's uranium, there's arsenic, there's other metals coming from the mines in that area. They're not at a high enough level to cause immediate concern. But we don't know how much that spill contributed. We don't know how much the mining operations have contributed because they never did that original studies. So, you know, that's where we're working from. But one of the other, so the concern about the fish, because people were concerned, can we eat the fish? Well, yeah, the fish are fine. I wouldn't take a sucker from Hidden Bay near the effluent. But you know, the ones on this side of the lake are fine, and the trout and whitefish, everything is fine. And in fact, they're not just fine; they're some of the best in the world. So you know, let's build on that, and not have people concerned about issues that are actually not a problem. But at the same time, they were, in 1990, they were proposing to build the Eagle Point mine underneath Wollaston Lake from Collins Point. And, you know, they had an environmental assessment process, and we sat down with the elders group and went through that, and they identified some concerns. They said, what's the relationship between the groundwater, the mine water, 300 meters under the lake, and the lake itself? Because we know it's all connected. It's all part of the same water system. But how does that flow go? And, you know, so I looked at the technical information. I said, well, they've identified 3 fault zones that run through the mine and into the lake bed, but they have not identified how that water flows, how long it will take to move, because it's going to move from the mine into the lake. We don't know if that will take 10 years or 100 years, and what kind of contamination that could bring with it into the lake itself. And the elders were categorical. They said, well, then that mine cannot proceed, because they cannot explain how the mine water will or will not get into the lake and what effect that will have. And so we submitted that to the environmental assessment process, and it was duly ignored, and the mine is there today, and we still don't know what's going to happen when they close the mine, when they let the water start flowing through it again, underground, how much contamination will make its way into Wollaston Lake, how long that will take, what will be in it. We don't know any of those things. Even in a sort of sense of scientific projections, where they look at some of the details and try and extrapolate based on, you know, measuring the flows, we can say, okay, well, if that goes the other way, then you know, we can guess at what would happen. And I think that comes down to, you know, one of the things that highlighted for me was that the elders were very specific in their questions, and they were right on. And they didn't have any difficulty relating to the technical information, as long as you know, I could work with that, and I can make my way around the words, the technical words, and explain things. Then the concepts are not that difficult, and they're not hard to relate to the traditional way of understanding. It's the problem is that the scientists and the companies have worked to make that information inaccessible. You know, and one of the things that came out of that whole experience, we pressured the Nuclear Safety Commission, was in the Atomic Energy Control Board. We pressured the companies, we pressured the province, and as a result, we now have the environmental quality committees. We now have publications coming from the mines themselves saying what's going on, and we now have access to the information from the Nuclear Safety Commission that, that was not public before.